Good afternoon or hello everyone. Welcome. My name is Xian Huang. I'm assistant professor of political science at Rutgers. This semester, I'm teaching the political change in China class. Louisa Shen, a professor of anthropology and also the instructor of anthropology of China class, and I invite Professor Mingwei Liu to give our class a lecture on China's trade union and labor movements. This is also one of the China classroom events organized by Rutgers Center for Chinese Study. Now it is my great honor to introduce today's speaker, Professor Liu. Professor Liu is an associate professor and a co-director of the Center for Global Work and Employment at Rutgers School of Management and Labor Relations. His research interests include comparative employment relations and human resource management with a focus on Chinese employment relations, labor movements, human resource management, skill development, and labor and human resource issue in overseas Chinese multinational companies. Professor Liu's publications appear in journals such as Industry and Labor Relations Review, British Journal of Industry Relations, Human Resource Management, and Comparative Labor Law and Policy Journal. He has also published a book co-edited with Chris Smith titled China at Work, a labor process perspective on the transformation of work and employment in China. His research has won several prestigious national and international awards. In 2015, Professor Liu was selected as Chancellor's Scholar at Rutgers. So in today's talk, if you have any question for Professor Liu, you can either put it into the chat section or wait to the Q&A time when you can raise your hand or use the little hand icon for your name to be called. Without overdue, let me turn it over to Professor Liu.
Okay, thanks for the introduction of Xian, and I'm very glad to have the opportunity to give a talk on Chinese trade unions and the labor movement. So let me share my screen. Okay, can you see it?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, good. So since you are in China-related classes, either political change or anthropology, I assume you already have some knowledge about China's society and China's political system especially. So trade unions are often an important political force in Western society. And the trade unions indeed are also important in China's system, but maybe in different way. So today, because of the time limit, I can only give you a very brief overview of Chinese trade unions and point out some of its recent development and challenges. So I hope this could be a beginning for those who are interested in exploring China's industrial relations or labor politics related topics. So the first question that we may have is China's trade unions, which is called All China Federation of Trade Unions. So China has only this one trade union, that is All China Federation of Trade Unions. All unions in China, no matter what level, in what location, what province, they are affiliated with ACFTU. So they are branches of ACFTU. So firstly, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the trade union in general. So in definition, what is a trade union? And what do unions do? So what is a trade union? So anybody has some clue about what is a trade union in general, not in China? So what is a trade union? What is a trade union or labor union in the United States or in Europe or in other countries like developing countries, India, Brazil? So what is a trade union? Anybody want to answer this question? You can unmute you, I think. So trade union is a very unfamiliar topic for you. So Rutgers has union, right? Rutgers has quite some unions. So faculty unions, staff union, graduate student unions. So there are several unions at Rutgers. So in general, unions are just a labor's organization. So what do unions do? Normally, why do workers, they organize the unions? Because in general, employment relationship is not balanced. Employers normally have much stronger bargaining power than in any individual employees. So workers form unions to confront management to achieve the balance of power between management and labor. So unions are workers' own organizations. Therefore, they protect workers' rights and interests. Specifically, workers increase wages, benefits, and also protect unfair treatment of workers at the workplace. So that's general roles of unions in most countries. However, there are also unions, trade unions in socialist countries or the former socialist countries, the Soviet Union trade unions and the former East European countries, communist East European countries, they had unions. So those unions, the roles of those unions are very similar to roles of Chinese trade unions. So we'll look at the functions or roles Chinese trade unions later. But these are questions we have at the beginning when we want to study trade unions in China. So what are the differences between trade unions in China and unions in other parts of the world? And therefore, this could help us better understand the nature and the development of trade unions in China. So unions in China, history of the ACFTU, the history is actually not long. It was founded in 1925, copying the Russian model. So this is the socialist model of trade unions. But history in Shanghai area is actually older. Some scholars found that those unions at the early development in China, they were like in Japan, their counterpart in Japan, they are enterprise-based. And also scholars found the origin of trade unions in China is from foreign companies in China. So that was 100 years ago, 120 or 120, 50 years ago, around that. When foreign companies entered China, later the unions developed. But they may not, many might not be members of ACFTU at that time. So before the Communist Party came into power in 1949, the ACFTU is actually was not legal, was not deemed legal by the then government, which controlled by the Kuomintang, Kuomintang National Party. So at that time, ACFTU before 1949, ACFTU operated mainly in the area controlled by Communist Party and underground in the area controlled by the National Party. So after 1949, the ACFTU became the gradually became the only one legitimate labor union in China. So especially after the so-called socialist construction. However, during the Cultural Revolution, of China, the trade union was suspended. There were other worker organizations, the radical worker organizations, they took over factories. So trade unions was suspended. And then revived after the economic reform in 1978. Because China decided to develop the so-called market economy. So as a market economy, unions are important and necessary because they are workers' organizations, they represent the workers. So ACFTU was revived after that. So let's look at some key institutional features of Chinese unions or ACFTU. So Chinese unions, the ACFTU has top-down three-level structure: national, regional, and grassroots. So national and regional, at the national and regional level, they are just like an administration arm of the party state with certain administrative power. So these are very much like a department of the party or department of the government. And many union officials at the national regional level, they normally have the civil servant status. Their positions are exchangeable with other government officials or party officials. So in many people's eyes, so those union officials are not much different from government officials or party officials. At the workplace, at enterprise level, unions are normally incorporated into management without independent power. So enterprise unions, enterprise level is very much like the Japanese enterprise union, different from the American local unions. So American unions, unions in the US and in Europe, in many Western countries, they are viewed as outsider. Unions are not inside, but outsider. So union officials are often professionals hired by unions, and they are not employees of the companies. But in China, at enterprise level, union members are all employees in the company, in the enterprise. And actually, in principle, everyone should be union member, including the CEO, top managers, they should be union member. They are, in fact, they are also union members. So everyone is a union member. Union at the enterprise level, union leaders are normally appointed by top management. And in Chinese workplace, many enterprise level union leaders are also actually also human resource managers or party officials in the company. or hold other managerial positions. In some cases, even they are vice general manager, or in many private companies, they are the boss wife, the boss brother, or something like that. To friends or family members of the boss are union members. So think about that. So unions are, in the West, unions are workers' organization. They bargain with employers. So they are often viewed as enemies of management, enemies of boss employers. But in China, they could be one family. Okay, so the boss wife may be, the boss is general manager, and his wife may be the union chair, or his brother is a union chair. So that's the situation at the enterprise level. So at the enterprise level, unions often don't have any independent power. They have to follow the command of the top management. So this figure gives you a more probably more clear understanding of the structure of Chinese labor unions, ACFTU. So at the national level, ACFTU is parallel with the national government and the party. The head of ACFTU actually has quite a high political standing in China's system. Right now, the head of ACFTU, their political standing is higher than ministers. So in central government, there are Ministry of Labor, which is called Ministry of Human Resources and Social Security. The minister is actually has a lower political standing than the head of the ACFTU. In late 1920s and early 2000s, the head of ACFTU was Wei Jianxin, one of the 7 top leaders in China, one of the 7 standing committee or Politburo in China. So his political standing is very high. So we see that in China, the political system, the unions, trade union, ACFTU has a very high political status. And at the regional level, regional union federations, regional ACFTU, they could be provincial union federation, city union federation, district or county union federation, even the so-called community 街道 union federation, and industrial park union federation. So this union federation parallel with their same level of government and parties. They are under the leadership of the same level party committees in name. And that's also industrial line. There are some industrial unions in China, but in reality, they seldom operate substantially. So in name, they have such industrial unions, but they don't really, the Chinese unions don't really operate in industrial lines. So below the regional union federations, there are enterprise unions, so which parallel with enterprise party committees. So at every level, unions, according to China's trade union law, China has a trade union law. This is think about that. It's just like Americans National Labor Relations Act. So that is Americans labor law or Americans labor union law. China has its trade union law different from the China's labor law. The trade union, according to trade union law, unions and also trade unions' own constitution unions at all levels should be under the leadership of Communist Party. So Communist Party is the lead party committee, head of party committees are leaders of that all level trade unions chairs leaders should report to. So we see that at the national level and the regional level, union officials have they have the government official status. At a regional union federations like provincial unions and city unions, county unions, the head of those union federations, according to the laws, the trade union law, they should enjoy the treatment of the vice head of the same level government and party. So they are also the head of regional union federations are also very high level government officials at each location. So therefore, some people just call Chinese trade unions as government-run unions or party-run unions. However, at the workplace, enterprise unions, their leaders don't have political standing unless it's big state-owned companies. In state-owned companies, because the union chairs probably is also are also the party officials, so they may have the government official status. But in the private sector, in general, enterprise union leaders don't have political status, they are not government officials. Therefore, they don't have government power. They don't have the administrative power. They are only affiliated or integrated into the management. So they listen to the management, report to the management, because they don't really have much the administrative power. But at the national level, regional level, unions could have very high political power. The power is from the government, from the party. So unions will issue many policies to the lower level government, to companies. And for important laws, policy making, unions at the national level and regional level often play important roles, especially if their leaders want to do something, they may have some voice. But whether this voice is for the workers, from the workers, is in question. Normally, the voice of unions still they originate from the government or party. They say what the party wants them to say, wants them to do. So functions of Chinese trade unions. So in general, trade unions in China, they still follow the Leninist dual functions. On the one hand, represent the interests of nation's collective good. In other words, it represents the party-state interest. On the other hand, they also represent the workers' interest. So it's a dual function or dual representation. So in socialist countries, if it's strictly socialist countries, in principle, no contradictions or interests between workers, managers, and the state. Right? They are all in socialist enterprises, serve the same goal, have the same interest. In principle, no conflict of interest. And therefore, the unions are class-based unions, have all inclusive membership. All people, all working class in socialist countries, they should be members of unions. And unions in socialist countries should represent all workers, no matter what your job, your title, your location. So unions should cover all of them. And we are all working class. We don't have, in principle, we don't have a conflict of interest. Therefore, unions, socialist unions, in reality, they have two major functions at the workplace. At the workplace, they normally would get workers to work hard. That's the union's major function. Another major function is look after workers' welfare. There's no exploitation because this is socialist countries. There's no capitalist. And therefore, what unions do, some people even, there are debates that whether we, as a socialist countries, do we still need unions, right? The state, the state already represent the worker, the party represent the workers' interest, do we still need unions? So therefore, in socialist countries, unions have very often have very limited role. They or roles on paper. Their roles are heavily redundant with the party of the government role. But Lenin said union is still important. We need union to act as a transmission belt between workers and the party. So unions could reflect workers' opinions, voice to the party. And then unions could also deliver the party's policies demand to the workers, to mobilize workers. So this is called transmission belt. So this is the Leninist model of union as transmission belt. So to a large extent, unions in China today still follow the dual functions. They are still transmission belt. They are necessary. They are still real necessary because they are the party needs them to communicate, to mobilize, to organize the workers. So this is still like the party's workers department. So at the enterprise, at the workplace, because China has developed so-called socialist market economy. So if the unions still do production function and welfare function, this is not enough because now there are actually conflicts between worker and management. So even in socialist stage, there are actually still conflict between workers and management, but maybe in different nature. But now in most Chinese workplace, these are not, they are private companies or foreign companies. So we see clearly the capitalist labor relations, the conflict between capital and labor. So the unions therefore should have some role in here, especially in conflict resolution. So through the labor dispute mediation and collective bargaining, in China, they don't call it collective bargaining, they call it collective consultation. So in socialist country, all workers staff are supposed to be union members or join unions by default. But in reality, after the economic reform, many workers, especially migrant workers, are not real employees or formal employees. They are not covered by unions, especially in 1990s, early 2000s. Now, more and more workers are union members, even they don't know they are union members. Think about that. If the union automatically sign you up for union membership, you probably don't know you are unions. And also, unions are quite new in China. China's history and culture don't have the tradition of unions. So in reality, many workers, especially workers from rural area, migrant workers, they don't really know what trade unions are. They don't understand. They think this is something related with games. We know in video games there are so-called 工会, the same pronunciation, but a different word, Chinese characteristics. All these things, this is just a management department. All because union chairs are often human resource managers. They think unions are just one part of human resource department. So union leaders, as I said, is often appointed by enterprise management. At the regional, national level, they are appointed by the party state. So for union income, so in Western countries, union income come from mainly from membership dues. So as union members, you need to contribute your wage, part of your wages, normally 1% or lower percent of your paycheck to unions as membership dues. So that's the major source of income for unions. But in China, actually, unions' income mainly come from management, from companies, from employers. Employers should pay 2% of their total wage, total payroll to unions as union finance, union money. And individual workers, members, according to the trade union law, members should pay 0.5% of their monthly wages. But in reality, very probably mainly some public institutions, state-owned companies strictly follow this. Most companies, they don't follow this, or they don't reduce 0.5% or just 1 yuan or 5 yuan, 10 yuan per month. It's very nominal. And most companies, they probably don't ask members to pay union dues. So the union income mainly comes from employers. So 2% of wage payroll for many employers, this is still a big cost, unnecessary cost. Although 60% of the union charge will be returned to the enterprise union, still the employers often feel this is unnecessary big cost, so they don't want to have unions. But I'll say later they have to. They are forced to have unions. So another view is that unions. I also mentioned that unions are just like the parties, the parties workers department. They are incorporated into the state or party state system. So the party actually has the worker representation monopoly through unions. So some scholar like Eli Friedman called it appropriated representation, because unions should be worker organizations, workers' own organization or representation. But now workers don't have the right to really have such representation or organization. Instead, they all have to be affiliated to the ACFTU, the party-dominated unions. So in that sense, Chinese unions become an instrument of the party state in aligning workers' interest with that of the party's interest. Especially in recent decades, the party state is highly concerned of the social stability. So one source of conflict, instability comes from workers, workplace, strikes, work stoppages. So the party wants the unions to play a role to maintain social stability, to reduce strikes, reduce labor conflict. So that's the important function that the unions should do for the purpose to serving the party's demand. And where does the power of union come from in China? I already mentioned their power comes from the party state. They have high political status in the China's political system. They are leaders at the regional and national level, high-level government officials or party officials. But the problem is that at the workplace, unions don't have political status and union leaders are not government officials. They normally don't have much the political power. So at the workplace, they don't have political power. On the other hand, they are not a workers' organization. They are not an organization organized by workers. So they don't have the power of workers' solidarity or associational power of workers. Therefore, at the workplace, unions are powerless. So now, short summary about what I have talked about. What do Chinese unions do? So there's a book called "What Do Unions Do?" Published in early 1980s by Richard Freeman and James Madoff of Harvard University. So this book talks about unions from economics perspective. So from economics perspective, they argue that unions have two phases. One is the monopoly phase, the other is the collective voice phase. So monopoly phase is that unions have labor market monopoly power derived from the threat of they control labor supply, control labor costs through strikes, collective bargaining. So their monopoly power could help increase workers' wages, fringe benefits above the market clearing competitive levels. So that is called, they call unions as labor market monopoly. And unions also have collective voice phase because unions have internal democracy. Members elect union leaders, and also members approve collective bargaining agreements. So therefore, the internal democracy of unions ensures workers' voice. Therefore, it's called collective voice phase. It can help increase fringe benefits, improve working conditions, which are preferred by average workers. So as the economic theory of unions have two phases. Do Chinese unions have monopoly phase? Do Chinese unions have a monopoly phase, labor market monopoly phase? The answer is no, right? If we look at the definition, Chinese unions are not allowed to organize strike. They are not allowed to organize strike. So they don't really control labor market supply, and the workers don't really follow or listen to your unions, right? And the unions don't organize workers for strikes or other similar activities. And therefore, Chinese unions don't have monopoly phase. Do Chinese unions have collective voice phase? So within Chinese unions at the workplace level, within enterprise unions, according to the trade union law, there are also election procedures. It's also called democratic election, democratic participation. But normally only in large state-owned companies, there might still be some sort of internal democracy. There might be some election on surface, but very, very rare to see real democratic elections. And as I said earlier, leaders are often normally appointed by management or party state. So there might be some internal democracy in some Chinese companies, company unions, but not all. So on average, even if Chinese unions have collective voice phase, this phase is highly concentrated, very limited, and contingent on many other factors. So that's about collective voice phase, because the unions are not the workers' own organization. Party state phase. So there are people suggest that Chinese unions may not have monopoly phase, may not have collective voice phase. They may have the party state phase. Yes, as I just talked about, this they had very strong party state phase. They are even like the party's workers department. But this party state phase mainly we can mainly see this at the regional level or national level in the political system, but we rarely see this at the workplace. So at the workplace, we probably don't see any party state phase. So that's the major functions of Chinese unions. So this table shows the comparison of trade unionism in China and the West. In Western pluralist model, union rights based on freedom of association and collective bargaining. So these are major foundations and functions of unions. Unions organize strike, unions organize collective bargaining, workers freely organize their unions. So, but in China, freedom of association and collective bargaining is missing. This is any attempt to organize your own unions, your own association will be immediately cracked down in China. So related with the workers' organizations, every workers are not able to organize their own unions. So every union should be affiliated with the ACFTU. So the party state has the monopoly of worker representation in China. So in China, collective bargaining is not, it's called collective consultation. It's in name, it's also led by unions, but in the vast majority cases, they are just on surface. So formalistic, no substantial negotiation, and no right of strike in China. China's constitution, the old constitution had the right of strike, but it was removed in early 1980s revision. So right now, strike is legal, not illegal in China. In general, people don't think they have the right of strike in China. So, sources of union power. In Western society, union power comes from labor solidarity. The more workers, the more members, you have stronger power. It's labor solidarity. But in China, the union power comes from the party state. But at the workplace, it's normally powerless. Union governance in society is normally members elect union leaders and approve collective agreements. But in China, no genuine internal democracy, and union leaders are appointed. Union function. In Western society, unions represent the interests of members, but in China, the unions have dual representation. They represent the interests of the party of state, and at the same time also represent the interests of workers. In principle, in socialist countries, in principle, there is no conflict between the state and the workers, right? The state already represents the workers' interest. The party, Communist Party, is the pioneer of the working class, so no conflict. But in reality, we see a situation is different. So China's unions had experienced the crisis in 1990s, especially membership and financial crisis, because as I mentioned, more and more Chinese companies become private owned or foreign owned. They don't want to pay the union charges, 2% payroll, so they don't want to have unions. Therefore, also workers, if there are no unions, no union to sign up workers. Workers normally they don't join unions voluntarily or proactively. Normally just don't do that. It's, unions in average workers' view, unions are useless. Or you ask a Chinese, an average Chinese, ordinary people, they would say unions useless. So therefore, most workers are indifferent to unions. It's not relevant to us. Unions are not relevant to us. So this is a crisis for unions. Unions as an organization, they need to survive. They need to show the party that they are relevant. So they have some reforms after 2000. They have some reforms after 2000, especially union organizing, increase membership. So this table shows the actually the rapid increase of number of union members in China. So now Chinese trade unions, the ACFTU, is the largest union in the world, all over the world. This is the largest union. And the number of union members in 2017 is more than 300 million already. So today is even more than that. It's much more than all union members in the rest of the world putting together. So union members in China is much more than all union members in the rest of the world putting together. Okay, so that's because the ACFTU put great effort in organizing. But does this mean anything? The Chinese union members, unions, their power is not based from members, from labor solidarity. They are not really workers' own organizations. So in reality, this number is often meaningless. They don't organize strike. They don't organize genuine collective bargaining. So what do these numbers mean? They may mean that very high union income. Think about that 2% payroll paid to unions by companies. So union organizing in China since 2000, we see three major patterns of union organizing. So why union members increase so much in short time? These three patterns of union organizing could explain that. So the traditional pattern still works very well for large or medium-sized companies. The union, regional union officials, staff just go to employers. Okay, according to the trade union law, according to our party leaders, you should organize trade unions. You should set up a union in your company. Employers may not want to have a union or may want to delay. The union officials may threat employers that if you don't set up unions, you still need to pay the 2% payroll to unions as a union preparation fee. And our government tax department will automatically deduct the 2% union charges from your company's revenue. So, however, if you set up a union, I may give you some discount. I may don't charge this 2% payroll for several years. So now, if you join unions, you set up union employer. If they set up unions, they may be better off financially. And also, unions have at a regional level, they have political power. So they often use the political power to threat employers to organize. And for many small companies, even individual-owned business, like some small business in shopping malls, they still organize this. These things even self-employed workers, they should organize them, and they organize them to community unions. So the regional union set up the community union to cover all employees in medium, small size enterprises, even individual-owned business in every in every street, every shopping mall, every neighborhood. So that all greatly increased the number of union members. And they also set up some local industry level union associations to have some union negotiation and organizing. So that's similar to community union, but these are organized at the industry level. So through these strategies, they rapidly increase the union members. And also the similar strategies rapidly increase the collective contract coverage. So, but again, similarly, both the number of union members and the number of collective contracts are often meaningless. They don't have substantial roles like the collective contracts. They normally just repeat the labor laws. And in many places, the regional union federation develop a template of collective contract. So every enterprise union just fill in the template. And then I even saw a memo, a collective negotiation memo that is recording the process of collective negotiation. But this is also the template of memo. So the regional union federation give you the template of collective contract, template of memo of collective negotiation. You just fill in the names of your company's managers and unions, then send it back to the regional union federation. Okay, now you have collective contract, you have unions. So that helped very little for workplace issue, helped very little for workers. So the ACFTU also have some other reforms, like one important one is called institution building. So the ACFTU in the past 2 decades has past 3 decades has actually inserted many pro-labor articles into China's labor laws and labor policies, especially the 2008 labor contract law, and also the revision of labor contract law in 2013, especially on labor dispatch on the contingent labor. So ACFT, so in name, if we look at the paper, many China's labor standards are quite good, like the use of contingent labor dispatch, the agency workers. So we know that in many Western countries, there are increasing use of agency workers. In China, this is also true. But in China's labor contract law revision, it says for company can only use at most 10% of your workforce. At most 10% of your workforce are labor dispatch agency workers. They set up limit. They also have strong restrictions on the labor dispatch agencies. They have many requirements for labor dispatch agencies. So those are, on paper, are very strong regulations of contingent labor, much stronger than many regulations in Western countries. But in reality, they are very weakly enforced, and many companies still have more than 10% of workers as agency workers. They have no problem with that. And So institutional building effort of ACFTU, which is good on paper, but it's not really enforced in reality. And some regional unions have some experiment in recent years, in recent decades. So it highly depends on the leaders of regional unions. Some regional union leaders, because they are also government officials or party officials, they want to do something to have some performance so that they can be promoted often or changed to other powerful government or party positions. So they want to, or even promoted within the union system. So they want to do something. Or some union leaders, they think we should do, they think they should do something for workers. They feel some responsibility for workers, so they want to do something. So these capable and pro-labor union leaders, they at the regional level, they have some experiments like direct union elections, like the industry, local industry level wage negotiation, like professionalization of union staff. They hire people who have the skills, who have the motivation to do things for workers, to as the union staff at the local, at the grassroots level to help workers. This is the Shenzhen experiment. But overall, these experiments, they have some limited success, but very hard to spread to other places. And even in these places, after these union leaders, after they retire or they are changed to other positions, the experiment may be stopped or become formalistic. So union leaders at the regional level are important, but not sustained. So we have seen, therefore, we have seen some positive changes at the local level, but not sustained. And in general, Chinese union still is the one that is relevant to Chinese workers. So workers after 2010, we see the rising number of labor conflicts, especially workers' collective resistance, strikes, work stoppages. So that shows that workers are not satisfied with the unions, and the unions did a very poor job in representing workers. In many strikes, in a growing number of strikes, like the Honda strike in 2010, workers clearly asked to organize their own unions, to elect their own unions. So some workers gradually they have the awareness that they need their own representation. So these are great challenges for ACFTU. ACFTU can't, the Chinese unions, so they are in very difficult situation. And they, on the one hand, they have to maintain social stability. On the other hand, if you want to do that, you have to represent workers, organize workers. But they cannot really do that in China's system. So since 2010, within the Chinese union system, these called on many reforms, but in reality, they have done very little. They have done very little to reform because of the system, the constraints of the system. Okay, I'll stop here because the time limit, we only have 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Probably I think I talk a couple of minutes about this, the conclusion slide. So the future. So I talked a lot about the current situation and the development of Chinese union. How about the future? The future, we can see the future, we can see that China's political system is still quite stable, and we don't see the significant change of the union. the union structure and function. So the double identity, double function, double representation may still remain for Chinese unions. So the challenge is that how to promote workers' interests without promote conflict. The party doesn't want conflict. They want a harmonious society, harmonious labor relations. So you can organize strike, but unions normally in general in the West, their power comes from the labor market monopoly, come from strikes. If you don't have the weapon of strikes, then what power do unions have? What kind of power you can use to protect the worker, promote the worker interests? And in China's context, how to represent worker interests without the party state? Currently, for some, we have seen actually some relatively successful cases that unions help workers in China. So normally this is because unions use their political power. The regional union federation directly intervene in workplace because they have the high-level government status. They are government officials. They could force employers to make a concession with the workers to settle the conflict. So party support is often very important for unions. If unions want to do something in China to benefit the workers, they often need party support. So if you don't have party support, how would you do that? So in reality, the answer lies that the union have to influence the party to promote worker interests. So the union leaders try to gain support from the party, from the government, so that they can have power. They can use that power to confront employers to support the workers. But that is the so-called the party state phase. But in most cases, unless in some big strikes, we cannot see such party state phase. So for the future change, I see that because the regime, this political system is still stable, so we don't expect radical changes at Chinese trade unions. We might expect some bottom-up experiment changes, especially at the regional level, but it's also depend on the whole entire political context. So after 2015, we may know that China strengthened the control of civil society, control of labor NGOs, so that makes workers' action, especially collective action, more difficult. And work unions also become more conservative at the regional level and the workplace level. So some scholars argue that the future might lie in the so-called hybrid model of representation. So it still follows the dual functioning. So it often happened in workplace that had strikes. So after workers have the wildcat strikes, unorganized strikes, regional union federations often intervene, or government officials often intervene. So they may force employers to settle or to make concessions with workers. And then they may supervise workers to elect unions. So union leaders may be, in most cases, still they have to be agreed by the management, agreed by the party or regional union federation, or even nominated by them. But in that case, after the strike, workers have some sort of election of unions, and some union members might be directly or indirectly elected by workers. So such unions might do something for workers in the future, and we have seen some cases. But still, this is very limited. This is a possibility for the hybrid model. Okay, I stop here. Questions and answer. I'll try to answer.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Liu, for the very informative presentation. Now we open the floor for Q&A. Louisa and I already raised some questions in the chat, but before I reading the question from the chat, I want to see if anyone, especially students in the audience, anyone want to ask questions to Professor Liu. Any questions? Okay, so while you maybe thinking or formulating your questions, I will just I will read Louisa's first question.
I think I typed that question about halfway through, and I think he pretty much spoke to it, actually.
Okay.
I'm very curious about the second question and your question, so.
Louisa, do you want to pose your question directly?
Oh, well, you mentioned harmony, and we had just, that was the last thing we were talking about in my class, this whole Khrushchev campaign or whatever you call it. It's just been such a saturating slogan in China. And I just wonder if you could say a little bit more about how it's used, how it comes up, you know, who's interested in talking about harmony, what it refers to in the union worker party sort of configuration that you're looking at.
Okay. So harmonious society was, I think, under President Hu Jintao, he has become up with the slogan harmonious society, and after that, the unions and also the party state come up harmonious labor relations. So let's think about the labor relations. Labor management relations. In capitalist society or capitalist economy, China now has economy is obviously has the capitalist feature. So in capitalist economy, the relation between capital and labor is inevitably had conflict, right? At the workplace, the workers want higher wages, employers want lower wages, and also many other issues. So how to get the harmony? So that means we need to solve the conflict. So unions should play the role according to the party. The party wants the union to play the role. How could the union do that? I say that at the workplace, unions had the function so-called labor dispute mediation. According to the law, the labor law, trade union law, every company, especially a company with unions, they should set up labor dispute mediation committee. And I think several years ago, I think in 2012, they have a special regulation on labor dispute resolution committee. But before that, the law actually said the committee should be three parties: workers, unions, and management, representative of three parties. So we see that this structure clearly separates unions from workers. Unions should be workers' representative, right? Now you have the three parties, unions, just like the so-called transmission belt. So later, China might realize this issue, so it changed its regulation that the committee had two, should be composed of representatives from management and from employees. These just two parties. But in reality, these representative employees are often union staff, or in most cases, they are still managerial staff, because union staff at the especially union officials at the workplace, they are often management officials, managers. So how to solve this issue with management controlled this resolution committee? So very few workers go to that kind of committee. They still go to management directly, or directly go to outside government-run labor dispute mediation committees, or go to court. Or when I interview workers, when I talk to workers, they say that those are all useless. What is the most useful to solve your problem? They say strike. Only actions, only strike can solve this. So this kind of harmony hard to achieve if the union can really have the worker support, can really represent the workers, can really speak for workers. So that's one case, but for all other cases are similar, like collective negotiation, collective bargaining. Unions don't have their own voice. They don't represent worker interests, really represent worker interests. Then you can't solve the problem, can't reach harmony.
Mm.
Okay, thank you, Professor Liu. If I may, I want to ask a question about the union's role in promoting or to slowing down the trend of automation in Chinese factories. In recent years, we know that a lot of local governments, they encourage local firms to use more machines, robotics, in manufacturing in order to address the problem of labor shortage, work injuries, etc. So in the short term, I can see workers might see the benefits of improved working environment, increase of productivity, when their factory use more robots or implies automation in manufacturing. But also in the long term, there could be chances that they could be laid off because they don't need so many labor force anymore. So I want to know what's the preference, what's the standpoint of ACFTU on this issue, and whether the ACFTU's preference, interest on this issue have changed over time.
This is a very interesting question. So ACFTU, I think they have done some research. They have investigated this issue, have some internal report. But in general, ACFTU always say that they care about workers' employment, workers' jobs, and on the other hand, the recent focus of ACFTU, because ACFTU in the past, before 2010 or even before 2015, the focus is on collective bargaining, collective contract. Now they have, it seems to ACFTU, they have little to do. They have very few things to do. So the recent years, they actually focus on skills, on vocational training, on skills upgrading. They put a lot of resources on so-called 大国工匠. So highlight the importance to develop worker skills. So they see the automation as an opportunity to upgrade the worker skills. They also tell the workers, they want to tell the workers, you need to upgrade your skills, otherwise you probably will lose your job. But of course, the government want to, it's not just local government, the national government also want to further upgrade China's industries. So automation is a very important part. So, and also China had a very significant labor shortage already for more than 10 years. And in the past 2 years, it's even more severe. Many companies have to give workers, pay workers bonus to hire them. If you can stay here and work 1 month, you can get the bonus, 10,000 renminbi, not small. And many local government help companies to recruit the workers. So this also highlights the need to have automation, because China very fewer and fewer Chinese people want to work in factories. So unions in general, they support government initiative automation. And if anything, if local government have some very specific quota for that, of course, the local unions would support the government. They always in the same line of the government. And workers, for now, because we don't really hear workers in policies, and most workers, they don't work in factories. If they do want their factory job, of course, they worry that they may lose the job because of automation, but they have no way to do anything.
Thank you, Professor Liu.